Around year 60 AD, the Roman Empire has taken over most of Europe except for Britannia, which still resists. The Roman army arrives on the island of Mono with the intention of killing 300 Druids, executing them mercilessly one by one. The Druids, however, die on their knees in prayer because they never give up hope that their fabled warrior goddess would one day save their people from the Romans, even in their final moments. Commander Paulinus informs King Nero of the most recent massacre later in Rome, addressing the Druids' myth of a warrior goddess. Nero issued a proclamation prohibiting any woman from holding a position of authority after acknowledging that they cannot permit the Druids to discover a savior. Meanwhile, in Britannia, the Iceni tribe is living in peace under the leadership of King Prasutagus and his queen, who are the proud parents of 2 young girls. Siren the warrior tells Prasutagus one morning that Catus, the new procurator sent by Rome, is not a big fan of Britain. The queen takes the girls to language lessons and a cosmetics appointment while the men talk politics. After they're all dolled up, they head to the market, where the girls become alarmed upon seeing several guys hung from crosses. The queen's maid informs her that those dead men are actually Christians who Rome executed because of their beliefs. But at first, she doesn't understand the big deal, because she believes they are criminals who receive their penalty. The queen leads the girls to the market despite her lack of fear. As they scan their surroundings, they come across some Trinovand warriors enjoying a drink. Cardamanda beckons the warrior goddess Boudica to the queen as she kneels before her in a sudden sighting. The other warriors bend down in agreement at that point, but a stall owner raises an objection on behalf of Rome after hearing the maid tell the girls about the goddess mythology. Cardamanda chops off the man's hand and then decapitates him as he tries to convey the queen to the Roman guards. Then, before the Roman guards can locate them, everyone flees. Sometime later, Prasutagus explains he had to negotiate and bargain with the centurions to prove his wife's innocence. For around a year, the queen isn't allowed to return to the market. Anything she wants, she must send a servant for. Then the queen asks him why the Trinovand warriors saw her as their goddess. So Prasutagus guesses it's because of her barbarian blood. In the afternoon, the queen plays with the girls using training swords, but it's clear none of them have proper training. Prasutagus soon joins them while Siren announces he's leaving, and the queen notices he's been in a constant broody mood since he lost his family in the war. Then she teases her husband with the wooden sword, which makes Prasutagus think the barbarian blood in her is stronger than he thought. Since obviously the queen can't leave her origins behind, Prasutagus decides to gift her the dowry her father gave him when he married her. It's the Boudica sword, which was forged by forgotten magic and protected for centuries by the Druids. Its color changes with the flickering fire. The next day, Procurator Catus visits the Iceni tribe and Prasutagus has no choice but to kiss his ring. The villagers pretend to be impressed by Catus's presence as they enjoy a nice lunch together. But it's obvious that they find his passive-aggressive remarks about their culture and his appreciation of their fort, which suggests he wants to take it, unsettling. Subsequently, Prasutagus gives his men strict commands because Catus has the power to annihilate the hamlet for even the slightest error, in an attempt to subtly warn him that the area is hazardous and possibly put an end to any thoughts of him settling down here. He orders Siren to gather up a group of bandits and undesirables to present to Catus as tribute. Siren obeys his king, but he doesn't like the idea. Sometime later, Prasutagus leaves with his men to catch all those bandits for tribute. After a few days they come back, but Siren has bad news for the queen. While they were fighting the bandits, they were ambushed and Prasutagus died in battle. The queen has a total breakdown and sends the men away, yelling at them for not protecting their king. The next day, since there are no male heirs, the Iceni tribe declares her their new queen leader and gives her the royal torque that marks her as such. Siren doesn't look too happy with this decision. The ceremony is suddenly interrupted by Catus and his men, and he explains the Roman Empire doesn't accept women in positions of power, and that now he considers the tribute they sent him a bribe. Because of these 2 crimes, Catus is going to seize all of her land and punish her along with her daughters. In order to prepare his warriors for an ambush, he also discloses that Siren was the one who provided him with Prasutagus' location. The queen's daughters are quickly separated from her by the soldiers, who also discard her torque and rip off her garments before hanging her from a tree and flopping her. The tribe is forced to watch as the queen is repeatedly struck, while the soldiers are putting down any protesters. After the punishment is over, they brand her face with Nero's initials, an act usually reserved for slaves. In the evening, Cardamanda and the Trinovand warriors sneak into the Roman camp and silently kill a bunch of guards until they find where the queen is being held and take her away. By crossing the river, they manage to move unnoticed and make it to the Trinovand tribe, where they take care of the queen's wounds. While she rests, she suffers a fever and keeps asking about her daughters, So Cardamanda has to tell her the Trinavent tribes are her children now. The queen refuses to accept it, but thankfully at that moment, the girls enter the tent and reunite with their mother. Cardamanda also gives her a set of fake teeth that she stole from a centurion because a warrior must be able to bite. A few days later, when she's finally feeling better, the queen leaves the tent and discovers the warriors are training her daughters to fight. She asks them to take a break so they can spend some time together, and learns that Cardamanda used to have children too, but they were killed by the Romans. The girls also explain that in the eyes of the Trinavent tribe, the Mark Catus gave her Brancer as their leader, and that her duty is to bring the tribes together to fight the Romans. The girls even tell her that she has no choice. Later, the queen decides to train with a dummy, but her movements are clumsy. Luckily, one of the warriors joins her and guides her on how to hit correctly. Their training session is interrupted by Cardamanda, who brings her the Boudica sword. It appears that Cardamanda killed the soldier who received it from Catus in order to get it back. Though her trainer remarks that bronze isn't a decent metal for a sword, the queen is deeply moved by the gesture. Wolfgar and his clan arrive to greet the queen at that same moment. Her inexperience and lack of armor don't impress Wolfgar, who believes he should be the one in charge. He then goes on to mock her sword, breaking it in two and tossing it into the river. The warriors are concerned because the queen is rushing to dive into the ocean to retrieve the sword, as the currents are powerful enough to submerge an individual. However, the queen comes back and shows the sword magically fixed itself, which impresses everyone and causes them to kneel as Wolfgar announces she can depend on him and his men. The queen raises her sword and finally accepts the name of Boudica. In the evening, the warriors recover the royal torque as well and do a ceremony that officially welcomes Boudica as the new queen of the United Tribes. She offers a heartful speech about regaining their freedom and mentions they can ambush Cardus' convoy in 2 days. Wolfgar is skeptical because Cardus has a powerful army, and it'd be like walking to their deaths, but Boudica makes her sword float back to her hand before leaving, and everyone sees it as another sign. While Boudica is in the forest ready to fight alone, Wolfgar shows up with his men, and they accept to help her fight while chanting her name. 2 days later, Saren, who is now a member of the Roman army, is leading the caravan as it crosses the woodland. In the middle of the road, they see Boudica by herself. She requests to play with Cardus. When Saren initially tries to disregard her demands, she threatens him violently until he goes in search of his supervisor. Boudica uses the opportunity to remind everyone that she is the queen of these territories when Cardus appears. Then, with a swift motion of her blade, she kills Cardus. At that moment, the tribe warriors come out and surround the Romans in a very successful ambush. As the Romans attempt to defend themselves or flee, there are soon conflicts breaking out all over the place. Boudica's warriors, however, are merciless and kill every enemy they come across. Even though Boudica occasionally loses her foot or her sword, she never gives up and continues fighting until not a single Roman remains and their heads are impaled on spikes. When it's all over, the tribesmen take gold and anything useful from the bodies. 2 warriors find Saren trying to get away and bring him to Boudica, and the mere sight of him makes her so mad that she starts stabbing him over and over for his treason. A worried Wolfgar has to pull Boudica back before she loses her mind, and she announces they'll ride for Candelas. Wolfgar thinks it's a good idea, but they'll have to get a blessing from the Druid Council first. In the evening, the Druids give them their blessing by making Boudica and Wolfgar drink from Catus' skull as tradition dictates. After the blessing is done, Wolfgar tries to flirt with Boudica, even though he already has 2 wives, but she turns him down because she still considers herself to be the wife of King Prastutagus. Another druid visits Boudica after she is left alone to discuss the purpose of being alive. She reveals to Boudica that her girls have passed away, but she won't accept it. As the druid tells Boudica that her daughter's souls will be with her always and that she will soon pass away, but not before she must lead her army once more, Boudica begins to reflect on all of the family's memories spent together. Disturbed by everything that she has learned, Boudica exits the shack to ask Wolfgar if he has seen her daughters, and he replies that she has only imagined them. She has a nervous breakdown and passes out as a result. Moments later, Boudica wakes up in a bed and sees her daughter's spirits by her side. This time she knows they aren't real, but she still appreciates their support and promises they'll reunite soon. A few days later, Boudica and her army arrive at Camulos. This town was occupied by the Romans after they murdered all the locals and made it a retirement settlement for their senior soldiers. It's easy for Boudica's group to invade the town and kill all the Romans because of their old age, causing a complete massacre with heads decapitated included. The fight is over in just a few moments, and after they had taken anything valuable, they set the whole settlement on fire and Boudica announces they just got started. Later, after they've set up camp, Boudica notices the warriors are celebrating in a very peculiar way. Wolfgar explains they are getting the same mark she has on their cheeks as a way to pay tribute to her, which upsets Boudica because the symbol equals slavery. However, Wolfgar points out they can't read, so they're giving the symbol a new meaning. When they make it to Cambridge Forest, they ambush another Roman convoy and dozens of soldiers are killed with no mercy. The more they fight, the more coordinated Boudica's army becomes, but also the more vicious, and heads are decapitated left and right. Later in London, Boudica's army attacks the harbor in the middle of the night and burns down their enemy's ships. The Roman soldiers try their best to hold the line, but there's nothing they can do against these furious tribesmen, and Boudica takes great pleasure in decapitating their captain. Meanwhile, in Rome, riots are taking over the city and buildings are burning down. People aren't happy with how costly war is and are demanding a victory. Paulinus tries to rescue Nero, but the king explains he's a musician, not a warrior. He feels that Roman has forsaken him, so he decides to self-delete. Although Paulinus is heartbroken to find out of his king's death, he assures his soldiers that they will be departing early and makes a vow to deliver Rome the victory it deserves. As soon as Britannia learns of Nero's demise and Paulinus' journey, the tribesmen get concerned because the king's army is stronger than that of regular guards. Wolfgar speaks with Boudica, informing her that winter is approaching and the tribesmen need time to heal. He believes that the best line of action is to return in the spring with additional troops from the north, as fighting now would mean walking to their deaths. Boudica insists that her troops must complete the task at hand and refuses to send them home. The spirits of her daughters point out that Wolfgar is probably mad because she turned him down, but Boudica still doesn't want to lay with him even if it's for the greater good. They can't reach an agreement, so Wolfgar takes his men away, and Boudica is left with only the Trinovantes tribe. As the tribe prepares for battle the following morning, they find out that Paulinus is on his way to Watling Street to see her. Boudica, full of enthusiasm to leave, gives her tribe a pep talk and plants a kiss on the ground, vowing to restore their freedom. To their surprise, the soldiers shift aside to allow the tribesmen to pass as they rush toward the road to launch their attack. Expert strategist Paulinus has set up the ideal ambush with hundreds of archers who will shortly open fire and begin murdering the tribesmen. Horrified, Boudica commands her soldiers to turn her carriage over for protection, but it serves little purpose as many of her men are still engaged in combat and are falling from the carriage like flies. Boudica tries asking her daughters for help, but the girls explain her time is finally over and she must join her family. She decides she doesn't want to die like a coward, and Cardamanda shows her support. So Boudica gives her orders and everyone comes out to go down fighting. At that moment, they hear screaming from the forest and discover that Wolfgar has come back with his men to help, surprising the Roman soldiers from behind and using their own crossbow to fight. Romans start falling all over the place, but their numbers are still greater, so soon both Wolfgar and Cardamanda fall in battle. Boudica kills as many Romans as she can in a fit of rage after witnessing these killings, but her daughters tell her that it's time for her to be with her family again. Boudica is struck by an arrow while she is preoccupied with their ghosts, and the Romans seize the opportunity to surround and stab her repeatedly until she dies. Boudica thinks about her family as she passes away, and her soul meets them again in the hereafter. Currently, London is home to a statue depicting Boudica and her daughters.